In May 1940, on a quiet road in northern France, a German infantry sergeant became the last man in modern military history to die from an arrow fired in anger. The man who killed him was a 33-year-old British officer. He was carrying a 6-foot English longbow, a basket-hilted Scottish claymore, and a set of bagpipes. He was not lost. He was not insane. He was exactly where he wanted to be. His name was John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill. The men who served under him called him Fighting Jack. The men who served above him called him a problem. History remembers him by the name the Germans gave him, Mad Jack. He was born on the 16th of September 1906 in Colombo, Ceylon, Gshu, a corner of the British Empire that no longer exists on the same map. His father was a colonial administrator. His upbringing was disciplined, classical, and, by every available measure, ordinary. He attended the Royal Military College at Sandhurst. He was commissioned into the Manchester Regiment in 1926. He served in Burma. He rode a motorcycle the length of British India Guizhou, more than 1,500 miles, Guizhou, for no reason other than to see if he could. And then, in 1936, he resigned his commission. The empire was not, in his estimation, providing enough war. What he did next is where the legend begins to take shape. He did not retire to a quiet country estate. He took up the longbow Guizhou not as a hobby, but as a vocation. He competed for England at the World Archery Championships in Oslo in 1939. He played the bagpipes well enough to take second place in the military piping competition at the Aldershot Tattoo. He worked briefly as a film extra in London Guizhou cast specifically because he was one of the only men in Britain who could shoot a longbow on camera and look as though he meant it. He appeared in The Thief of Baghdad. He appeared in A. Yank at Oxford. And then, on the 1st of September 1939, Adolf Hitler invaded Poland, Gshu, and John Churchill went back to war. He returned to the Manchester Regiment as a captain. He was deployed to France with the British Expeditionary Force, and when he packed his kit for the European continent, he packed it the way he intended to fight. He brought the bagpipes. He brought the claymore. He brought the longbow. When his fellow officers asked him why, he gave the answer he would repeat for the rest of his life. Any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed. May 1940. The German Wehrmacht had carved through the Low Countries and was driving the British and French armies toward the sea. Near the village of Le Sepinet, a small British detachment was preparing to ambush a German patrol. Captain Churchill, second in command, gave his men a single order. He would signal the attack Guizhou not with a whistle, not with a flare, not with a shouted command Guizhou, but with an arrow. He waited in the cover of a granary loft. He knocked a barbed broadhead. He drew the bow. And as the lead German non-commissioned officer stepped into the road, Churchill released. The arrow struck the man in the chest. He is the only British soldier known to have killed an enemy combatant with a longbow during the Second World War. He may be the last soldier of any nation in any war to have done so. The ambush succeeded. Churchill led his men out under fire. Days later, at Dunkirk, he was among the last to be evacuated from the beach. He was not finished. He was barely beginning. Back in England, the British military was assembling a new kind of unit, Guizhou small, fast, brutal. Volunteer only. Officially designated No. 3 Commando. The men who joined were told they would conduct raids behind enemy lines, often at night, often outnumbered, with no expectation of reinforcement. It was, for John Churchill, a perfect fit. In December 1941, No. 3 Commando launched Operation Archery Guizhou, a raid on the German-held island of WWII on the western coast of Norway. The landing craft approached the shore under heavy fire. Bullets cracked against the hull. Men were dying before the ramps dropped. And as the boat closed the final distance to the beach, Major John Churchill stood up at the bow. He did not draw a pistol. He did not shoulder a rifle. He raised his bagpipes. He played the March of the Cameron Men. A Highland war song, more than a century old, Gacho, as the ramp slammed down and his men charged into German machine gun fire. When the pipes finished, he drew the claymore from his back and he led the assault personally. The photograph survives. He is the only man in any official British wartime photograph wielding a drawn medieval broadsword in combat dress. It is not propaganda. It is not staged. It is what he actually did. The raid on WWII destroyed German fish oil factories used to produce glycerin for explosives, sank shipping in the harbor, and captured almost 100 prisoners. Churchill was awarded the Military Cross. It was his second. July 1943. The Allies invaded Sicily. By September, they had crossed onto the Italian mainland at Salerno. Churchill, now a lieutenant colonel, was given command of No. 2 Commando. The fighting around Salerno was savage. The German defenders had dug into the high ground. Allied forces were being chewed apart in the valleys below. Churchill was ordered to take a German observation post on a hill called La Molina, near the village of Pigoletti. He took 6 men. 6. Under cover of darkness, he led his small detachment up the slope, sword drawn, pistol holstered. They moved silently. They reached the perimeter of the German position, and then Churchill did what only Churchill would do. He attacked. He moved from sentry to sentry through the dark. He took prisoners one at a time, at sword point, in absolute silence, Gassot using the disoriented, half-asleep guards he had already captured to call out the locations of the others. He worked his way through a German company position the same way a man works through the rooms of a house. When the sun came up, John Churchill walked back down La Molina at the head of 42 German prisoners and a captured mortar. He had captured the position with a sword and 6 men. When he was later asked how he had done it, his answer became one of the most quoted lines of his career. I maintain that as long as you tell a German loudly and clearly what to do, if you are senior to him, he will cry Jawohl and get on with it enthusiastically and efficiently, whatever the situation. For La Molina, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Order. May 1944, the Adriatic, the island of WWII, off the coast of occupied Yugoslavia. Churchill was leading a joint operation between his commandos and Yugoslav partisans, attempting to dislodge a heavily fortified German garrison. The operation went wrong. The partisan force, separated from the British detachment, was driven back. Churchill's commandos were cut off and pinned down by mortar and machine gun fire on a hilltop. One by one, the men around him were killed. Within minutes, only Churchill and a handful of survivors remained. He did what he always did. He played the bagpipes. He played Will Ye No Come Back Again, Gju, a Scottish lament, Gju, until a German grenade detonated close enough to render him unconscious. When he came to, he was a prisoner of the Third Reich. The Germans believed they had captured a relative of Winston Churchill. They had not. The 2 men were not related. But the rumor was useful enough that the Nazis transferred their prisoner to Sachsenhausen concentration camp, north of Berlin, into a special compound reserved for high-value detainees, Gassot political prisoners, Allied officers, men the Reich believed could be traded. In September of 1944, John Churchill crawled under the wire. He escaped Sachsenhausen-Gassot, one of the most heavily guarded camps in occupied Europe, Gassot, through a drainage tunnel in the company of a Royal Air Force officer. He walked for days through Nazi Germany. He was recaptured near the Baltic coast. The Germans transferred him to a camp in the Austrian Tyrol. He escaped again. This time he walked, through the Alps, roughly 150 miles, alone, on foot, surviving on stolen vegetables and the contents of an emptied tin he used as a cooking pot. He crossed mountain passes still patrolled by SS units. He made contact with an American armored column near the town of Verona in northern Italy. He was returned to British command. The war in Europe ended within weeks of his return. And John Churchill, the man who had carried a sword across 4 countries, killed a man with an arrow, captured 42 prisoners with a blade, and escaped 2 Nazi prisons, Guizot was furious about it. If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years. He was not done. He requested transfer to the Pacific Theater to fight the Japanese. He was en route when the atomic bombs ended the war for good. In peacetime, he qualified as a parachutist. He served in Palestine. He learned to surf Guizot, the first man to surf the tidal bore of the River Severn in England, on a board he built himself. He commuted to work on a steam train and threw his briefcase out the window every evening as he passed his garden, so he wouldn't have to carry it home from the station. He retired from the Army in 1959. He died on the 8th of March, 1996, at the age of 89 in the county of Surrey, England. The claymore is in a private collection. The longbow is lost. The bagpipes survive in a regimental museum. He fought the most mechanized war in human history with the weapons of the 11th century. He was decorated 4 times. He killed with an arrow, captured a fortified position with a blade, and walked out of 2 Nazi prisons. Every story told about him is verifiable. Every record exists. Nothing about Mad Jack Churchill is myth. He was simply a man who refused to fight the war anyone expected him to fight Guizot and won it anyway. If a British officer with a sword and a longbow seems impossible, Guizot, wait until you meet the most decorated American soldier of the Second World War. He stood 5'5". He weighed 112 pounds. He was rejected by the Marines for being too small. And on a single afternoon in eastern France, he climbed onto a burning tank destroyer and held off 6 panzers and 250 German infantry Guizot alone. His name was Audie Murphy. That story is next. Subscribe to Shadow Command.